we go. So I'll call the meeting to order. And this is Monday, September the 14th. The time is 6:30 p.m. And this is the meeting of the Committee of the Whole, Administration and Finance for the Township of Edwardsburg Cardinal. And this is the September 14th meeting. And next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Does someone have a motion to approve the agenda?
No, but I'll move it.
Okay.
Second.
I have a mover, which is Deputy Mayor Deschamps, and seconded by Councillor Cameron. Those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Motion is carried. And so now I'm moving to item number 3 on the agenda, which is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Are there any disclosures here this evening?
None. Not here.
So minutes will note that there were no disclosures. Now, the next item on the agenda is item 4, which is business arising from the previous Committee of the Whole meeting, which was the meeting that was held on August 10th. The minutes have been circulated. Does anyone have any business arising from those minutes? Hearing none.
Is Cogeco still looking for their 31,000?
Well, that was a hypothetical, and I
Oh.
think it's still hypothetical until they know whether or not their application has been approved, and I think it goes both ways with both proponents. Okay, any other business arising? So item number 5 is delegations and presentations. We have none this evening. And item number 6, I had asked to put on the agenda. It's a single sheet there, and I wanted everybody to have that single sheet in front of them. And this is an invitation to a tree planting ceremony, which is going to be conducted at between 9 and 10 and 2 o'clock on Wednesday, September the 23rd. And it's being organized on behalf of, who exactly is the organizers? The Eastern Ontario First Nations Working Group carried the commitment from the Whitehorse Yukon attendance meeting, and they've been working to try to create an event in Eastern Ontario, an event which is at the intersection of connections to land, ecological restoration, as well as truth and reconciliation. Now, as council knows, we've been attempting to establish relationships with First Nations both through the Port of Johnstown, had some relatively good success there with the Mohawks of Akwesasne, but this is a little bit different event, and it is on the 23rd, and unfortunately I have commitments pretty well all day that day. Now, I've responded that I will be in attendance, but what I'm looking for is some member of council to attend in my behalf, either 1 or 2 or 3 members. Ordinarily, it would be the deputy mayor that would go, but I think that's a working day for you.
Can't do that day.
I was planning on going, Mr. Mayor.
You're planning on
I
going?
am, yes.
Okay.
Myself too, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so that's 2, and then,
I told you before I'd go.
okay, so if you gentlemen then would take it upon yourselves to respond to this RSVP to this and make it clear that you're representing the mayor. So Councillor Cameron, I'll ask you to make sure people know that you're representing the mayor. The mayor had previous commitments.
I will, thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to get that sort of made public, and I wanted to make sure that there was no disconnect there. For the minutes, we'll just note that it takes 3 good councillors to equal 1 mayor. Well, that got by without too much trouble.
There wasn't too much laughing there, Mr. Mayor.
Did you hear any chuckles?
We weren't really worried, Mr. Mayor, because there's 3 councillors going, so we're way above it, so.
Okay, we'll go on to item number 7. So item number 7 is 7A is an update to the tax receivable and cash flow analysis. And I think you've all had an opportunity to review this, and I wanted to thank the treasurer for putting this together. It's sort of a combination of 2 things. Well, first of all, it kind of gives us a reflection on what our decision, how well our decision worked out to extend the interim tax deadline to May the 31st, and gives us the comparables where we stood tax receivable both in 2019 and 2020. So, and then we also talk about where we are cash flow as well. So I'll just open the floor up for questions to see if there's any questions of the treasurer, and then depending on the questions, maybe the treasurer can highlight a few of the things from the report as well. You know, are there any questions coming forward to start with? If not, I'm gonna ask the treasurer to highlight it because I think it's an important report. So to the CAO, to the treasurer then?
Certainly. So the report does indicate that our tax receivable for 2020 is in line with our 2019 balance at the same time in August. Actually a little bit better, slightly better. And the next chart below that actually shows that there was a very significant increase or decrease in our prior years where we had $42,000 owing in 2019, and we have actually cleared those prior year tax receivables to nothing, which is quite good, and as well as our 3 years has decreased from 11 down to $4,000. As an update to this update, in terms of the receivable, I did an analysis of the payments received from September 1st to today, and we received another $244,000 in the first 14 days of September, bringing our receivable down to 1.57. And I looked at 2019's September 30th date, or tax receivable amount, and it was about 1.4. So we're about $170,000 difference, but our PAP will certainly cover that. So we're going to be completely in line again by the end of September, maybe even further advanced to that. So that's a good news story. In terms of bank balance, we're very close to the same amount as August of last year. The only difference is in our OMPF last year we received $212 per quarter, and we only received $185. So there's a difference about $82,000 less in OMPF money. That makes the biggest chunk of that $112. And then we did have some COVID costs related to purchasing of some things that would have affected that 31st. There's also, you know, I could have outlined quite a few things because we had decreases in revenues in RENA, but we had increases in some expenditures. We've had, you know, there's lots of things that variate the cash flow, but those were the two main ones that I wanted to point out. And the other kind of good news story again is that we've seen quite an increase in the pre-authorized payment plan. So we've got more money coming in per month over last year's same month. It kind of is a twofold. We have more money coming in each month, but that actually would have increased our receivable as of the 31st because we have to wait for that money till the end of the year. And of course, our balance means that we're not going to receive as much tax penalty revenue as we've anticipated. But there's good and bad in both aspects to that.
Well, one thing is pretty obvious though, and that is that the number of people signing on to the PAP program is increasing steadily.
Yes.
And I just had one other question on the previous page, which is the total balance of the tax receivables when we looked at August 2019 compared with August 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, and prior years. So under the prior years column, we're showing zero. So I don't know how to ask this question, but I know we have a number of agreements with people to pay up by certain periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is the reason for the zero in 2020 because there's some agreements in place that cover it, or is it because everything is paid?
Yeah, it's definitely because everything is paid.
It is.
There has actually been even a few of the properties that we had put into registration that were cleared as a balance, and they made up the biggest amount of the prior years. So the property's either sold, and then the lien was released as a
Okay.
result of that, so, yeah, no, it's the agreements have actually, the agreements that we set up with those individuals have actually cleared those balances.
Oh, okay. So from a tax arrears point of view, we got really no arrears then?
No, there's some arrears, I mean, we still have to look at that, 2-year and 3-year, but I won't look at those until the end of this year.
Okay, so, how do I wanna phrase this? There are no arrears, there's no arrears that exceed 3 years, as of December 2019.
Correct.
Okay, all right. So nothing to go into registration this year.
No, I don't see any probably this year going into registration.
Okay, any other questions before I move on? Okay, all right, vote to move on then.
No.
Good job.
Great job.
So moving on then to 7B, which is the Munisoft ETF extension application. Again, there's a briefing note here, and members will know from the approval of the port accounts, we have quite an extensive list of port accounts that are paid by electronic fund transfers. And this is the treasurer. Do you want to speak to this briefing note then, please?
Certainly, yeah, with our accounting system, an extension to the accounts payable is this electronics funds transfer application. It secures the banking particulars for each vendor, and a file is sent through to RBC so that it's a lot more secure in terms of sending. It just eliminates some of the checks that we're processing, and that saves a bit of time as well as helps our vendor get their money faster. And I'm really doing it as a result of more asks on the vendor's side. We've seen a lot more people requesting that we have that as an option. And this extension with the way that the file is sent to RBC is a much more secure way of sending those payments, for sure.
So are there any questions of the treasurer? Just a quick one. How many counts do you think you would add if the recommendation goes through?
I don't know the exact number. What I think, if the recommendation goes through, we'll probably reach out to some of our other vendors who haven't indicated and just say that this is an option. And if they're interested, to provide us with their banking information, and we'll proceed to pay them in that fashion from there on. But we need their permission for sure.
Okay. All right, the briefing note has a recommendation attached to it. Chair's looking for a mover and a seconder to action.
I'll move.
Okay, I have Deputy Mayor Deschamps and seconded by Councillor Hunter. Further discussion, if any? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. Okay, so then I'm going to item number 7C, which is the Safe Restart Agreement funding. And again, there's a briefing note here. And the treasurer is telling us that, along about mid-September, we're going to be getting a chunk of dollars from the province that apparently is allocated to us on the basis of number of households. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
You want to speak further to the briefing note?
Certainly. Yeah, so the province and combined with the federal government has provided this funding. It has to be specific to COVID-19 expenses or pressures related to the pandemic. There will be a report that the township will have to submit early March of 21 with respect to the costs that were incurred during 2020. And the funding is really, if we don't use the funding up in 2020, it's expected that the money will remain with the township to be used in 2021. And a later date, there would be certainly another report for 2021's expenditures. This is just their phase 1. There is a phase 2. I don't think that at this point it's worth submitting for phase 2 funding. Based on what we've seen, we've really only incurred about $60,000 thus far this year, so I think we should be able to use the money that's, the 192 should give us enough money between 20 and 21 for the pandemic. Potentially, if it hangs on, there may be another round of funding that they'll offer anyways, depending on who submits for phase 2.
Question?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I just have a question regarding the amount. This would take into consideration all of our departments, such as fire department and also libraries as well. Is that correct?
It would be anything. I haven't seen anything from the library, although we have paid a lot of, some of the expenses we've incurred thus far has included some of the barriers that were installed at the library and such.
Right, okay.
So, yeah, and if the library themselves have some additional costs, they should probably seek that.
Advise you of that?
They should seek that from me, yeah.
Okay, I'll advise them on that, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Other questions before I have a number? So I have a number of questions as to how this is going to get action. Within our tracking of our COVID-19 expenses, which you're saying as of September the 9th totals around 61,500. Within that number, there will be some numbers that relate to salaries, I believe. And we've already paid those salaries from general operating account. So they're paid, but they are a trackable expense, and they're an allowable expense. So the next question is, when the 192,800 arrives, my understanding is that it arrives in one tranche, just one check, deposited into the operating account. So we've already asked for regular reports on the tracking of the dollars that we're spending for COVID-19. I would expect that, but I don't know how to action this, I would expect that when we get our regular reports as to what our trackable COVID-19 expenses are, we will see beside it what portion of the 192.8 has been used. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that we set up another reserve account for the 192.8, but I would like to be able to see, for political purposes, how it's been used and where it's been used and how it's been allocated. So, I don't know how you set that up in your ledgers. Maybe you can explain how that'll be done, or how it'll be reported back to us.
Right, so, already, council has seen, on the quarterly variance report, I have set up 2 line items, and if you look back on some of your prior quarterlies, you'll see there was a line item that said COVID-19 expenses. I can certainly provide, a further breakdown between salaries and expenditures if that's requested. But your quarterly will show you that amount that's been expended up till that point.
Okay, and then the same report, if it's a single page report, can show us what portion of that 192 is left and expended. Okay, all right. So now I'm going back to the first paragraph at the top of page 2. And well, just following over from the sentence from the previous page. During the declared provincial emergency, the CAO and the treasurer had, through the delegated authority policy, the authority to purchase up to $50,000. That's single items up to $50,000, is it not?
Yes.
All right, now, the provincial emergency orders are still in place, but the declaration emergency has ended, right?
Correct.
So the provincial emergency orders are still in place and require the township to comply by making modifications to the current operating procedures, which may incur additional costs not included in the approved budget. So I'm assuming that it's that sentence that gives rise to the last paragraph or last sentence or so in the recommendation. Authorization to purchase, for the purchase of specific costs related to COVID-19 to an upset limit of 50, right?
Correct.
But then I'm looking at the next paragraph down from where I stopped reading. It says, as per the procurement policy 2015-57, with the exception of declared emergency, that's ended now, any other emergency expenditures not in the approved budget shall be authorized by the following: the department head and the treasurer and the CAO and the mayor. So all four must agree?
That's
Alright.
what the policy is.
Okay,
Our
and
policy
that's
states.
up to 50,000, right?
In that particular sense,
Doesn't have a
it did
limit.
not establish a limit.
Okay, so that's where I'm having the trouble, because I see a disconnect between that last paragraph that I read where all four must approve and the recommendation that says that the CAO and the treasurer are authorized to purchase to an upset limit of 50. So how do I reconcile the disconnect?
So if I may, I think the thought process was that with this recommendation, it would be very similar to the process that we were using while the emergency declaration was declared. That if an expense arises, like $300 or $1,000 for barriers or whatever the case may be, that's within the treasurer of the CAO to approve that, basically making that $192,800 part of the approved budget, so to speak, as required, as necessary. Versus having a $200 or $300 expense needing the authorization of four separate individuals.
So at what point does the paragraph at the top of page 2, where it says, as per the procurement policy, with the exception of a declared emergency, that's out of the way now, any other emergency expenditures not in the approved budget shall be authorized by the following, and it says and. But the last sentence of the recommendation says no, just the CAO and the treasurer have authorization up to 50,000.
Yeah, so instead of having each purchase of COVID-19 expenses approved by four separate individuals, the thought process was that it would just fall in as part of an improved budget, which would set those limits very similar to what the CAO and the treasurer have now.
So that puts that paragraph where all four have to sign, that puts that, well, the way I would read that, in conjunction with what you're telling me, is that if there's an expenditure required above 50,000, all four would have to sign it.
That would be correct.
Okay, so the procurement policy, we're really within that, I still haven't got this completely reconciled in my head here. Although, if it's just pertaining to this 192,000, I can maybe understand where it's going. In any case, I'm the only one asking questions here, so anybody else got any questions?
Well, Mr. Mayor, it seems to me if the bylaw 2015-57 specifies those sub items, the four of them, then there seems to be an inconsistency with the 50,000 authorized by the treasurer and the CAO and that particular policy. Like, why wouldn't we straighten that out if that's the case?
See, that's what I'm finding. I'm finding the two are in conflict.
Yeah, so.
So if I may, currently, under an approved budget, the CAO and the treasurer would be able to authorize an expense of 50,000 or under. Right? So basically, all we're saying is that not 192.8 just becomes part of an approved budget, giving that same authorization to the CAO and treasurer,
Yeah.
specific to the COVID-19.
But my point is, if we do that with an approved budget that's around $5 million, why wouldn't we simply have this bylaw have the same approval process in it?
So through the
You're not
chair.
gonna
we're-
get 4 people, and why would
We're-
you tie up
we're-
4 people to spend $300?
So we typically wouldn't, and I would say that would be a large one-off. So let's say that you get into November, and the director of operations is probably not gonna be happy with me. Well, let's say we have a massive water main on County Road 2.
Yeah.
That we're into substantial amount of money that we were not planning to expend. We don't have time typically to go back, we need to take some action, so it would be simply a quick yes, yes, yes for those 4. But it would be an extreme one-off in that particular circumstance. That's all. What we're trying to do right now is not have to come back for a number of small items where they can be completed relatively quick and get action.
Yeah, well, to me, it seems common sense that if it's outside the budget, if the budget is approved and all that stuff, and then you come along sometime in the year and you have this emergency, if you wanna call it, or whatever, that we expect action. I mean, we don't want you to sit around and say, well, we follow this, you know, and go through a long discussion of whether you should spend it or not, because that just wastes time.
Okay, all right, so let's get this one out of the way. I don't think the inconsistency is totally resolved, but let's get it out of the way.
Can I have another comment, Mr. Mayor? Like the second last paragraph implies that the province expects a report of how we've distributed this money. But, I mean, this could drag on into 21 or I don't know how long, right? So is there some specificity that is the government's given, that you do quarterly reports or annual reports, or, so we just keep collecting the data and then at the end of the time submit it? Is that what would happen?
So through the chair, I think for anything up to the end of 2020, we would need to submit that report by March of 2021.
Okay.
And then any of that remaining money, it would appear, it would accumulate for 2021, and then by March
Yeah.
of 2022,
Every year
we
you
would
report the drawdown.
just an annual report of the drawdown until that money is.
Okay, so we have a recommendation in front of us, looking for a move and a second to action the recommendation. Okay, I have Mr. Bradley and seconded by
Yes.
Councillor Cameron. About to call the question on the recommendation. Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. Okay, and so now I'm on the next item, which is the reserve and reserve fund policy, and treasurer's reported back to us with some updates that we asked from our first run-through on this. And tonight, we're only going to deal with the reserves and hope to get through those today, and then and make our decisions, and then deal with the reserve funds at the October meeting. So we had some pretty good discussions, and then we asked for the report which was circulated, which is the report which kind of outlines the 5-year averages and where we're going with that. And so I think the main job in front of us tonight is to just set the lower and the upper limits for each of these reserves, and then come to an agreement on what is the annual amount that gets put into each of those, and the staff works that into the first draft of the budget. So I'm gonna look at them one at a time. I'm gonna go right down the list that we see in front of us. I'm on page 5. Well, now that's an interesting thing, because I've got an old system and a new system. Just give me a minute to get caught up. So I'm on page 5 of 13. It's the same in both. And this is the administration account. So we're spending, what we see from the treasurer's report is that the balance at the end of 2019 was 147,000. And I'm not gonna deal with hundreds here tonight. 147,000. We're gonna transfer in 44,000. There's nothing budgeted to transfer out, so at the end of the year, it should be about 191,000. So now, as far as the lower limit is concerned, the treasurer was indicating 25% of the annual operating expenditures, and we were asking, well, what's that number? So now it's been recommended that that number is about 255,000. And you've got the backup documentation to see where that number comes from. And at the upper limit, 250,000. Now, here's a case where the lower limit already exceeds the upper limit. So we just need to set a couple of numbers here. We can adjust the lower limit or adjust the upper limit. And please note that the policy is that we're going to include an amount of not less than 10 in each annual budget. So, need some discussion how your thinking goes with regard to this particular reserve. Any discussion? I'm gonna go through this pretty quick. If I don't hear discussion, I'm gonna move it along.
Is the 255,071, because it's higher than the 250, which is the upper limit, is that an abnormal situation?
Yes.
So it's more or less a one-off?
Yeah, and in doing so, in doing this exercise, that was revealed to me. It was like, oh, that's quite interesting that, you know, I had set the upper limit at 250, or the previous policy had set the upper limit at 250, and we never really looked at the lower limit. When you look at that, is our lower limit at 25% too much, or is our upper limit too low? You
Yeah,
know, that's-
exactly.
It's, which is it, so.
My recommendation would be just leave them, if it's a one-off situation.
Okay, Councillor Cameron saying just leave it and move on. Everybody prepared to do that? I'm about to move.
So hold on, so just so that I'm clear, we're leaving the lower limit at 25% still? So
Yeah.
it would,
Yeah.
so our,
The upper
The actual number is 255.
so if I'm reading it correctly, that the number we have in there is 191 now,
Yes.
and we'll put it in to take it up to 255 at the end of this year? So we'll
No.
be,
No, our balance, the projected balance for 2020 is 191. So we haven't, in this case, wouldn't have reached our lower limit at this
Right.
point.
so what does that leave us for budget next year? Does that mean that we would be expected to add another, whatever that is?
10.
10.
Minimum of 10.
We would add another 10 to bring it up to 201.
At minimum. At
Right.
minimum. This year we did 44, so, you know, it depends, I guess, it really depends on what the projects or what assets are needing to be replaced. So I think within budget, every time we take a look to see what's coming up in the next couple of years, and do we need to put more away, or this is just guiding, it's just a guiding document, so it's trying to give you a sense of whether, you know, we wanna maintain a certain level. The 25% comes from auditors, because they say don't reduce your overall reserves 25% of your operating, so.
And so just so I'm clear though, like comparing it back to, 2014, which is our highest year is 168, and we're going to take it to 90,000, 87,000 higher than that? That's the expectation for next year?
No, not necessarily, no, it could be a benchmark that we're meeting, not necessarily in 2021, it could be a benchmark that we meet
We'll
at some
continue to
point in
build
time.
towards
Yeah.
255, that's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
just wanna make sure that I'm on the same page, because I don't wanna,
So, yeah,
Expected to get
so
there in the next
I would
budget
look at the lower limit and it can be difficult now because in the previous policy, we never had a lower limit. But if you look at that lower limit as, what is that value that you would not want that reserve to go below? So is that in administration, does that happen to be 10% and not 25%?
That's what
Does that happen to be 100,000?
Does it have to be 25?
No,
The chair,
no.
sorry, does it
No.
have to be? So then, I mean, for me, looking at that average, I'm not exactly sure whether looking at the numbers, why I went from 168 down to 62. Obviously, there was a big purchase, and it's been slowly building its way back up again. But to set it at 25% when, you know, the highest amount that it's been in the last 6 years was 168 seems rather lofty to me. So the 25% there seems pretty high to me. It seems on average to be, you know, maybe 10 to 15%.
I guess that, in my view, I think that the auditor's suggesting 25%, right?
Overall.
Yeah. And so I think you would say, irrespective of the past history, like, I know we've struggled with reserve funds, okay? In some cases, we felt that they weren't high enough. So bringing that history into a decision for a future makes me suspicious that if they weren't high enough before, we're going to forecast something lower than what we really might need in the future. In other words, it dampens the projection. So I'm in favor of going with staff's recommendation of the 25%, and that as a target. And when we come to budget time and we're doing the reserve fund, it would be helpful, I think, for us to compare what is being proposed as the budget for 2021 with a column beside it compared to what the lower limit is. So in other words, we know we're not really getting to the lower limit, but we at least know that we're on track to get closer. And so I don't know if we can, build that into that process, but that's my take on it in any case.
See, one of the other implications here too is that if we set the lower limit at 25% of the annual operating expenditures, which in this case it would be $255, then the policy is we should include an amount of not less than 10. But 10, if we put 10 in next year, that'll only bring it up to 201. We haven't yet brought it up to the lower limit. So the staff may come back to us next year with 50 to go in.
Well,
And say to us, well, you know, you're not at your lower limit.
yeah, no, but that's why I brought that comment up, is that we have that comparison column, and we can make a judgment then in saying, well, the 250 is sort of our Christmas wish list, you know?
Yeah.
And we're not quite there yet, okay? I mean, it's a process.
Okay, so I've got a number of speakers, so Councillor Hunter, then Deputy Mayor. And before you speak, Councillor Hunter, what was the big takedown, or can you give us some help? What was the big takedown where we went from 168 in 2014 to 62 in 2015? We actually took 100,000 out. What was that for?
It was not for a capital expenditure, it was actually to reduce the tax rate, so that we could use 97,000 to reduce the tax rate in that year.
Ah, okay, so that's what we used it for. Okay. That's politics. Councillor Hunter.
He doesn't, wish he didn't answer the question.
I guess we'll be transparent about it.
I don't think there's a set percentage that we can go at 25% for every reserve here.
No.
I'd sooner see this reserve be set at approximately 20% and 5% or so be moved into some of the other operating expenses here, like roads and stuff, where we should be building up a higher reserve for some of them. Our administration looks like we've been close. I think if we have a low limit at around 200,000 in there, we're still gonna have to put 10 in this year to keep bringing it up. But the maximum of 250 in there. I think we gotta back off some of these ones that's not as severely impacted. As we said, the only reason it dropped down was political here, that there was 100,000 taken out of it. It wasn't because the administration suddenly needed to draw down there, where there is roads, for example, this year and operating expenses last year. I think we maybe need to be looking at 30 or 35% there that we need to be shooting at for a low limit, and some of these other ones that we stay on budget. Maybe we look at 20% or 15% or something for some of them, and move more of a percentage over into our high need ones. So,
Okay, so Councillor Hunter's
I think the
proposal.
auditors mentioned like 25 in every one. I think they're talking overall 25, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's my interpretation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it would be up to us to distribute that in such a way that we're happy with it.
okay, so Councillor Hunter's suggesting that the lower limit be 20% of the annual operating. Deputy Mayor, you wanted in next.
Yeah, just, so has there ever been a situation in administration where we had to dip in to reserves and take out, 10 to 15% short of 2014?
Well, 2014 is a good example.
It's-
2015.
So-
Right.
So, and maybe, I think at least I'm looking at it in a different way than the members of the committee are looking at it. So, let me try to explain how I would look at this reserve with respect to administration, is that we would be setting a lower limit with respect to, where council does not feel that reserve should go down lower to in any 1 year. Okay, so if we set, let's say, the lower limit for administration at 150,000. Okay, that would give guidance to staff in the particular sense. So let's say that a roof needs to be replaced, and that roof costs 40,000. There's the option that you could reduce that from 191, take 40,000 off, be at 151, and you're still above that lower limit
Within policy.
within the policy, right? But if for instance, it was 100,000, staff at coming budget time would not look to take anything more out of the reserve than what that lower limit that council has established as, hey, that's bottom line. That means that if that project's gonna go forward, it needs to go through tax rate increase. It's that kind of philosophy and process, that's where this policy really comes in handy as we start to develop those budgets. What's that variable or limitations that in the development of the budget, that keeps everybody in a comfortable level with that reserve, that we don't drop down below.
So then-
Okay, but it's always subject to
And-
budget
and-
discussions,
And
always.
it is, but that's part of the reason.
Provides guidance to staff.
It does.
It provides guidance to staff when you're recommending to draw money out of a reserve or reserve fund, that you don't go below the lower limit.
Yes,
Yeah, that's basically what it's there.
That's-
Well, except that we may
So-
violate that policy, but at least we know we're violating it when we do it.
Yeah, exactly.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and yes.
And we
That's
fully
not
well
gonna
did in
recommend, but it
2014.
may come to that.
We fully well did in 2014, when we took the 100,000 out, we knew exactly what we were doing.
Yes,
Reducing
yes, and,
the tax rate
yes,
by about
and it's
3 or
not,
4%.
it's certainly not meant to say that can't happen, it's
Right.
just, with that first draft budget, then when we're looking at funding sources, that's what we take into consideration.
Can I comment?
Yep.
So with that philosophy in mind, if we went with the 20%, roughly the 20%, that'd be 200,000. We'd have to get, to do a $50,000 project, we'd actually have to get it to 250 with what you're describing. With a reserve that, short of 2014's never been above 96,000. So I'd have a problem with setting that as the minimum for this one. I mean, 10% there makes sense to me. It's gonna be a long time before, even with this rate, at putting 10,000 in at 10%, we'd only be at 106 next year, or 107 next year. So, you know, we still, with that philosophy that you just said, we'd only be able to use 7,000 of that, without going against the policy. Unless I'm missing something.
Well, all you're saying is that there'd be nothing available to draw.
Wasn't that the whole idea of building a reserve, is if you, I mean, you use the roof analogy, I mean, isn't the whole idea of building the reserve, to do that if it was needed?
Correct. Correct. So in this particular, if you recall that, we just took the auditor recommendation of 25%. But now that we've done the calculation, you can probably see that 25% in certain reserves are not really functional, right? Like maybe the low limit for administration is 10%, so it would be at 100,000.
And then the roads.
So you have 91,000 that, you know, as things need to be replaced, there's an option to draw down the reserve a little bit and still maintain a healthy amount.
Okay, so Nico runs around the table to see where we are with regard to the lower limit being 25%. And so the proposal has been put forward that lower limit should be reduced to 20%, and there's another proposal that it should be reduced even lower than 20%. I need to go all around the table once. Starting over here.
I'm fine with 20%, Mr. Mayor.
I can live with that.
Not a chance.
No, I was the one to suggest 20% there, but listen to our CEO, I'd be willing to get in between and go at the 15% level. That's a low limit of 150,000. Still leave, we build up, we're gonna get up to 200. There we got 40 or 50,000 we can draw on if we had to.
I like the 20.
You like the 20?
I like the 20.
So I got 20, 20, 20, 20, and 15.
If
You're
we
not
get in,
there.
we get in a bind, we can transfer.
Yeah, it's political, you do what you wanted in budget time.
Yeah.
We did it in
Councilor, what do you want to do,
2015.
or Deputy Mayor, what do you want to do?
Not at all, no.
Not at all, what do you mean,
No,
not at
I
all?
just don't see the sense. I mean,
There's targets that are nothing
well, I
but
just don't think
targets.
it's a reasonable target. Like,
What is?
20%. 20% of $1 million budget is $200,000 as a minimum. Our current upper limit is 250,000. I mean, like, it just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me. You're only putting $10,000 in a year. If we make it, it's 96 now. So-
197, 191. It'll be 191 at the end of this year.
Sure. So put another 10,000 into it, you're up to,
201.
201.
sure, right. So you're 5 years away from being $250,000. Like, it just seems crazy to me, like, to be going up that high.
Well, now you're talking about the upper limit, not the lower limit.
No, the lower limit. I mean, 2018's 95,000, 2017's 84,000, 2016's 74,000, like.
I'm not sure the point you're making.
So.
The 20%'s too high. That's my point's 10 to 15 max for me,
At the lower limit.
at the lower limit, yep.
Okay, but I've got
I don't
already
have to be in agreement.
5 people saying 20% is is, they're prepared to live with 20%. Now, one
And under
last,
the circumstances, we could possibly live with 15 or 12 if the situation arises, because we do have the
no,
flexibility.
it's not a situation arising, it's a policy.
It's a policy.
All right, it's
Mr.
policy,
Mayor.
but we can
Mr.
change
Mayor,
that.
maybe, could I make a suggestion? That we go through the sub-account, whatever they call it, I call them sub-accounts. Do one iteration, and let's see what the total comes out at, okay? Then if we say, well, geez, we're not happy with Public Works or whatever, do some readjustment on the second iteration. I mean, we're picking numbers out of the air, 20%, 25%.
Exactly. And, but I don't know how we would track this. Let me put it this way.
Well, let's go with the 15 and put the number down, and then we can tally it all up at the end and say, well, we're not.
What's our lower limit and what's our upper limit total?
Yeah, and then we're not
Can
happy
you do
with
this while we
that.
go?
I would suggest that that would be something that would be a little bit confusing to try to figure out where we land at the end of the meeting by doing it this way. The only other thing that I can suggest is that I think that we could go with a low, like what the CAO was talking about before, is what is the council's comfortableness with the lowest amount that should be. Doesn't necessarily have to be a percentage of the operating, but if you say, I don't wanna go under whatever, that should be your lower limit. So if you wanna make sure that you always have $200,000 in that account, then that is your bare bones. This is a policy. If you wanna say it's 100,000, we don't draw it down under 100,000 until we get down to have a real conversation about we're drawing it down under 100,000. I think Councillor Hunter's point about in some cases there's other departments that need a higher limit, so they might be more like a 30% or 40%. By the time you average that all out, you probably are at 25%.
Right.
So I think that point is should be well taken.
Okay, but I'm stuck here right now because I can't get off this first one.
So if I may try, Mr. Chair, if we go up to the top of the page with the 5-year average of the reserve, so sort of the reserve balance at the end of the year on the 5-year average was around 96,000, or let's call it 100,000. So it would appear over that 5-year period that council was comfortable with having their reserve around 100,000.
I would say you're correct.
Right? In that particular, there was no fear of, oh my goodness, if we have to replace the roof mid-year, we're gonna be too low.
Okay.
So that may be, so what we could do is we could say that, for the admin reserve, that the lower limit, we'll set that not to go under 100,000 for the draft.
The lower limit.
The lower limit, and then,
And upper 250.
then our upper limit will be 250.
Okay.
And so we have that range of working between 100,000 and 250,000.
Okay, everybody comfortable with that?
Basically, you're saying 10%.
In that particular one, I'm saying 10%. That looks to be the,
Okay, so I'm gonna move on here. I sense weakness. Okay, so I'm gonna set that at 10%. This year it's 100,000. The upper limit is 250, and I'm moving on to the tax write-offs. So the tax write-off reserve is at 130,000 at the beginning of the year. We're not putting anything in, we're not taking anything out. That reserve should be at about 130,000 at the end of this year. The lower limit is to be determined annual during budget deliberations, and the staff is recommending 12,500 as the lower limit. And nothing, I don't see a recommendation for the upper limit. But tax write-offs can be expensive,
So,
as we've learned, and so perhaps the lower limit should be a little bit higher than 12.5.
and through the chair, we would certainly agree. It's not the staff recommendation, all we basically did was 25% of the lower limit, that's what it
Of the
is.
operation.
We're certainly not saying that that's adequate.
I got you. So I'm suggesting that lower limit, we trying to let that not get below 100,000 again, using the same 100,000.
100K works.
And,
Yeah, I agree. What about the upper?
What's the goal?
and the
for
upper limit, I think we should look for something like 200,000. Because you never know when you're gonna get an appeal, the large commercial appeals, and they happen to happen. So we set the upper limit at 200,000, and then what should be the annual amount to go in there each year? We started it off with a $50,000 contribution in 2012, and we haven't put a heck of a lot into it over a period of time, and I think we drew a fair amount out of it in 2019. We had a
No,
big,
we've only just been adding up until last year. We added 20 each year for the, in all the times I've been here anyways, 20,000 each year, except for this year. We didn't put money in this year.
yeah.
But,
So- So yeah, this year's 2020, but we did draw out of it in 2019 when we had those appeals that we had to rebate.
yeah, a little bit with,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so can we use a number annual basis, 50,000 in,
20.
20,000 in?
Yeah.
Take us 5 years to get to 200,000. What about 25,000 in each year? Again, it's gonna be changed at budget time.
Sounds like an auction.
Sounds like an auction.
What's that?
You're like an auctioneer.
Yeah, because we gotta get moving here. We've got a
25,000's fine.
okay, 25 in. Okay, now I'm going to the one called election reserve. This is the money that we set up to run on our elections every 4 years. We ended 2019 at $7,100 in that reserve. We're gonna put $6,000 into it this year, so that at the end of this year, it'll be $13,100. Now, the cost of an election is approximately how much dollars?
Approximately 24, so usually we put in 6 every year until the final year, and then the other 6 is coming right out of operations.
Okay,
So the upper limit is 18 and it's 6 every year. That's been pretty standard for the last few
okay,
elections.
and what's the lower, well, the lower limit is when we draw it down in an election, on the election cycle.
Be pretty much 0.
And we draw it down to 0.
Yeah, we draw, it's a project-based reserve, so it's drawn down to whatever we need, and
So
if
at
there's,
6,000, we're gonna hit our 24,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's one though that our base won't get to 25, it won't stay at 6,000, it'll actually be, our base will be 0.
yeah, yeah, that's.
So that's the whole purpose of it, is to run an
Yeah.
election
Project.
without incurring a one-year
Okay.
expense. Okay, and now I'm over on cemeteries, and on cemeteries, if I've got it correct, the balance at the end of 2019 was 17,500. We're gonna put 3,500 in this year to bring it up, and we're not taking anything out. That'll bring it up to 21,000 at the end of this year. And the question is, what's the lower limit and what's the upper limit? Staff is suggesting that the lower limit should be about 1,250, nothing much lower than that. And that we should cap it at, once it rises up to about 35,000. So, everybody agreeable with that? Everybody's agreeable with that, and we're gonna try to put in a minimum, not less than $3,500 annually. Everybody's okay with that? That's it, etched in stone, written in braille. Fire department vehicles. So, fire department vehicles, $380,000 at the balance at the end of 2019. We're gonna put in 50 this year and take out 170, so that at the end of the year, we should have about 260,000 in that account. So, staff is recommending that the lower limit be around 137,000, and that the upper limit be around 400,000. So, what about a lower limit of 140? Rough? and an upper at 40, and we're gonna try to put in 50 each year. Any problems there?
No.
Correct, Treasurer Dodds.
Well, I am suggesting that we use the terminology 25% of the operating costs in this particular instance, as opposed to a specific value, because the fire department's operating costs could fluctuate, and so I would rather have using the term 25% of, as opposed to the
And I'm
140.
moving just the opposite direction. Because, just because it's numbers, you know, when we're talking about these reserve accounts, I'd rather just deal with raw numbers, but I see your point. And you're working on the percentages.
I'm looking at percentages in some
Yeah.
instances, yeah.
Okay, so 137 and 40, 400, go ahead.
Just a question for clarification regarding all of the fire department funds, or reserves. The money that we collect from the MTO callouts, where does that money actually go? Does it go to one of these reserves?
No, it's used as offsetting operating costs. It's a revenue line, a revenue offsetting.
Okay, so I'm winding up this one.
Yeah.
I'm moving on to fire department communication equipment. Fire department communication equipment, the balance in the reserve at the end of 2019 was 85,000. We're gonna put $30,000 in this year, which will bring it up to 115,000 at the end of this year. And I see, what is the 200,000 that the staff is recommending here?
Upper limit.
That's,
What have I got?
It's the upper limit is 200,000.
The upper limit is 200,000.
Yeah.
And this communication equipment, we haven't, is there a need for a lower limit here?
That was my question, Mr. Mayor, like, how much do we spend each year on communication equipment?
So,
Like, what do we need that's going to need money?
so if I may, you will recall a few years back, and I can't recall if it's 2014-ish,
Yeah, I think so.
around that 2014 time frame that the county fire service upgraded all of their radio communications. And at that particular time, it was, you could have a payback of your costs over 10 years, which I wanna say it was around 17,000 a year for 10 years. But one of the stipulations within that upgrade was that when it comes time for you to replace all of your radio equipment again, that the feeling was that you should have that money available. So that 200,000 is building up for that anticipated, after 10 years, that there'll be a number of the radio equipment that will require replacement. So I don't think, long and short, I don't think there should be a lower limit.
And I think if I recall correctly, we still owe from that 2014 upgrade.
Yes.
I think we financed it over 10 years, we didn't want that to happen again.
Correct. So we originally went, we asked for 5 years, but it ended up that the majority ruled because the county took out that loan, and
That's right.
it ended up 10 years.
Yeah.
So if I may, then the real number that we should be looking at is the minimum number per year then,
Yeah, your annual
right? So that we
contribution is
don't end up in
definitely,
that same spot again?
yeah,
Is
Correct.
that
yeah.
Correct. We should be targeting around the $200,000 mark at the end of that 10-year. I would say at 2024.
so we stick with the 20,000 for the minimum annual contribution, we'll get there for
We'll be
every 10
pretty
years, right?
close, yes.
And you wanna hope that by the time we get to 2024, we can replace the system for that amount of dollars.
Correct, so.
I mean, maybe by that time, it's gonna be 300 grand, you never know.
Correct. We were about 170,000 at that time, and that's why we.
Okay, so the upper limit here is 200,000, and we're gonna try to put in 20 a year, is that Everybody agree on that?
I think it's too
Okay,
low.
moving on, fire department buildings. There's 53,000 in the account at the end of 2019. We're gonna put 20,000 in this year to bring it up to 73,000. And then the lower, what is the lower limit and what is the upper limit? And the staff is suggesting that the upper limit should be 100,000, or million rather,
million.
which is, that's what it costs. I mean, actually, it costs about 3 million to replace a station. So, $1 million basically just buys you a good down payment on a $3 million station. And we're a long way from $1 million at 73,000. So, if we leave the upper limit at 100,000, and what's the lower limit? Well, again, if you come down to the fact that it's a specific purpose to replace a building, at some point, you're gonna draw that down, could draw it down to 0. So I don't know that there is a lower limit, but staff is suggesting there should be a 25% of operating costs. Now, what is 25% this year?
Still the 137.
140,000?
Yeah.
So let's put the 140 in as the lower limit, and leave the million as the upper limit. We're gonna try to put in, 50,000 a year. Is that agreeable to everybody? Okay, so we're moving on. And now I'm at policing costs, and this one was set up because of the tremendous way in which our policing costs were gyrating all over the place. They seem to have stabilized in recent years, but the amount in that account at the end of 2019 was 110,000. We're not putting anything in this year, leaving it at about 110,000 at the end of this year. And again, it was because of the tremendous gyrations that we were getting. We tried to smooth things out. And so now the staff is suggesting that a lower limit be about 298,000, I'm gonna say 300. And that the upper limit, well, again, the upper limit 150, but I think the upper limit should be, maybe the lower limit should be a little bit, in view of the fact that the gyrations have ceased, maybe the lower limit could go down a bit.
Yeah, I would almost be thinking like 10% or something like that.
Yeah,
For-
but
for
see,
the lower
10%, even 10% of our operating is what, 100,000?
110.
110,000? Okay, so if we said 10% of operating, that would be 110,000, and that would be the lower limit. And we could leave the upper limit at 150 and hope to goodness that we don't get back into that mess we were in before. Although there seems to be a lot of stability there right now. So maybe you can tell us from some of your meetings, I'm gathering that the provinces, that people across the province are relatively satisfied with the model as it exists today.
Yeah, the work that the OBP have done with respect to the billing model is a little more stable for sure. We usually see some reconciled costs back to the townships each year. Not more than probably $6,000 to $7,000 as a credit against the total costs, but we're still seeing that on a regular basis. So I don't see that, we've been able to absorb or manage this particular. The only trouble with each time that it increases, then it takes away from another department's ask if we have to increase. If they're increased by $20,000, then that's $20,000 that we can't use in another department.
Right.
So it's kind of a stabilization reserve that we can use.
Okay, so if we use 10% of operating as the lower limit, 110,000, and 150 is the upper limit, what is the limit to, what should we be putting in each year, 10,000 a year?
So we haven't been putting anything into it in the time I've been here. It was 150 when I first came, and we used it a couple of times, and we haven't really been contributing. We've always just been.
Well, one thing about it, if we don't contribute, it won't go up.
That's right.
That's guaranteed. So I mean, are we gonna try to work towards the upper limit? I mean, you're not
It's
gonna
up to
work
coun-
towards it.
It's up to council.
I think we should.
I do
10,000?
too, because you just never know where you're going, what's gonna happen.
10?
10?
10 annually? We can always change that at budget time. All right, I'm moving on then, and I'm on, oh, now, where am I?
Building department.
Building. So now I'm on the one called Building Department, and this is a little bit different because it gets financed from, from our fees. So it was 6,500 at the end of 2019.
From
We're
whole.
gonna draw down 21,000, estimated drawdown of 21,000 out of that this year, which would really leave us in a deficit position of 28,000 this year. But I think we've adjusted some fees, and I think we've seen some better revenue coming in than we originally anticipated. So the staff is suggesting that we try to adjust our fees in such a manner that our lower limit becomes 30,000 and our upper limit becomes 120. Is that what I'm hearing? So the question is, have we adjusted our fees enough to move us in that direction?
That hasn't been brought forward in front of council yet. I know that that the building official is bringing forward a fee schedule, but it hasn't been brought forward to council yet, so.
So what I could say right now is that there certainly does appear to be an increase in revenue from the activity this year, which is a positive sign. And I think with respect to the fee schedule, once it gets passed, will further put us towards the right direction.
Are the three townships on the same page?
Which stuff?
Doesn't matter.
Well, are the other townships on the same page with respect to reserve funds?
No, there's no connection between us and them.
Well, except that the fee schedule, aren't we coordinating on that?
No.
No, we're not, yes, as of right now, we're not there with respect to a coordinated fee schedule.
Now, going back to the discussion that we had earlier, I'm looking at the 5-year average in that account, and the 5-year average in that account looks to be about 10,000, which I think maybe the upper limit of 120 may be a bit overly ambitious. So, but I do like the lower limit of 30 to try to get our fees so that we're maintaining 30 in that account all the time. Because if you look at the 5-year history, I mean, we had 17 in it in 2014. That dropped to 783 in 2015, back up to 14,000 in 2016, 19,000 in 2017, and then a big drop down to, took it all out and went 2,000 in the hole in 2018. Again, that's strictly a function of how much fees does the building department collect. So, pretty much
Shouldn't we be contributing then?
no, we don't contribute,
But shouldn't we start?
No, it has to come totally from fees, and we have to do it by adjusting our fees.
But I thought we had discussed, it doesn't have to.
It should,
It should.
It should.
yeah. I don't think
Like the town of
taxpayers,
Prescott doesn't, the Augusta Township doesn't.
it doesn't make it right.
No,
Right.
I'm just saying though, it might not make it right, but why do we have to depend on our fees to cover our building inspector expenses?
That's what the Building Code Act and the Building Act actually indicates.
Okay, thank you.
It should be, it's just same as water and sewer, you know, those have to be, those reserves are built based on the fees that are collected from those users.
So we don't contribute then?
Councillor Honor.
I don't really know what we have to discuss here, because we don't contribute, and our lower limit's gonna be whatever's left in it, and our upper limit's gonna be whatever comes in above the cost, so it's just a floating.
Yeah, it's not
It's
a,
just
it's
a
not a
floating
rocket,
number,
yeah.
we really have no say in it, other than to look at it. If we're going into deficit, then we've gotta look at our fee structure, but other than that, nothing really to say about it.
So we might just well move on?
That's right.
I agree. So now I'm at Public Works, and in Public Works, we had 210 in there at the end of 2019. Now what's this 188? We were gonna put in 188 this year, and we're gonna draw out 66,540 to leave us at 332 at the end of the year. And again, it's a recommendation at the 25% of the annual operating cost, so the lower limit would be about 403,000, and the upper limit is suggested to be at 2 million. So discussion there? This is the one you were talking about
Well,
earlier.
I think we should be shooting for 30% of the lower limit in there, try to keep in there. I think we had a good example of that this year, so.
You couldn't give a better example. Okay, so if we use 30%, what would the lower level be? Quickly to the
484,
484?
yeah,
How'd you get that fast?
don't you worry about it.
Big pardon?
484,
Well, I'll take your math as being good.
that's a lower and 2 mil, upper.
2 million.
Okay, and the township,
So, if I, if I may, not that I'm arguing,
sounds like an argument to me.
Well,
About to be.
it's just that the balance at the end of 2020 is 332,000. If we set the lower limit at 484,000, that means we have to put in another 150,000 before we start to look from a policy standpoint, before you draw into that reserve.
That's exactly what it means.
Okay, I want to make sure that,
We're always in trouble on that.
But you don't have to get there in one step, in one budget year.
no, I'm not saying that, it's just, I'm just looking at it from a standpoint of preparing the
Yeah.
2021 budget.
Yeah, because the policy is that we would continue to include an amount of not less than 100 each year. And you know what? I
Should
think
we bump it?
No, I think we should say 100 net. We're gonna be 122 net this
Brought it
year,
down, yeah.
eh?
Yeah.
100 net. Everybody agree with that? Moving on. Okay, and so the number we're using there is 30%.
Okay.
Okay,
Just one.
moving on, winter control, near and dear to our hearts. 20,000 in the account at the end of 2019. We're gonna put 40 in this year, hoping to get it up to 60 at the end of this year. Lower limit of 50% of the annual winter operating budget, looks like that's about 71,000. And the upper limit is, what is the upper limit?
50% of the annual.
50% again?
50% of the annual, 25 is the lower and 50% is the.
142.
So 142.
142.
142?
Yeah.
So 71 and 142? And then we're gonna try to put in $20,000 each year? Everybody agreed?
Yeah.
Moving on.
Yep.
All right. Now, working funds, well, we used to call it working capital. It's been 750,000 forever and ever and ever. And I don't think there's any need to adjust it, because all of this money is really in the operating account, acting as buffer, acting basically as working funds, working capital. So no need to touch that one. And so now I'm on the last page, which is the recreation reserve. It was 159 at the end of 2019, we're gonna put 40 in this year, hope to get it up to 199 at the end of this year. Staff is suggesting a lower limit of 455, which is 25%, I guess, and an upper limit of 600,000. Any disagreements there? And we're gonna try to put in 40,000 each year. Everybody on tune with that? Moving on. All right, now the planning reserve, and we're gonna dip into that this year. So we had 0 in that at the end of 2019. I think that was largely because of was that because we drew it down for the official plan?
That is correct.
Right, and so it's at 0 at the end of the year. We're gonna put in 5 this year, is that the idea? And draw out, no, it looks like we're not gonna draw anything out this year.
No.
And the staff is suggesting that the lower limit be 17 and that the upper limit be 80. Now, am I reading something wrong here? We're gonna try to put in 16 this year?
No, that was the previous policy stated that 16 was the minimum annual contribution.
That's right, and we shorted it and only put in 5. because we're trying to make our budget balance.
So we can either adjust that annual contribution to reflect what we will be doing over the next 5 years as an annual contribution.
Well, the big thing is, we gotta get through 20 and 21, the zoning bylaw, and what do we got?
We're doing that out of operating expenses right now. We're not actually drawing anything out of reserves to offset that.
Right, we got any idea of how much what those costs are gonna be for 2020 and 2021?
17.5 each is what we've got budgeted for both.
That's what we got budgeted for both?
For both years.
My suggestion is, if we end up with 5 in that account at the end of this year, and don't take anything out of it, let it sit for 20 and 21 at 5, and then get the zoning bylaw out of the way, and then try to build it back up after that. That's my suggestion. Any disagreements there? Everybody understands, I mean, we're gonna spend money in zoning now this year. Okay, so I think we're getting consensus there.
Do you wanna drop the lower annual contribution to something more
You
in
have
line with,
16, you wanna lower
yeah,
Yeah,
Based on-
probably down to what, maybe
10?
8 or 10?
10 maybe?
Let's make it 10.
10?
And again, the first move to take 10 would be in
22.
2022.
Two,
Okay. All right, maybe we might squeeze 5 in next year, just to keep it alive. Okay, I'm going to the environmental reserve, which is the low lift station, the pipe coming out of the St. Lawrence River going to Greenfield. So there was 78,000 in that at the end of 2019. Didn't put anything in. It should be 78 at the end of this year, but I thought there was 20 that went into that automatically.
That's actually the fund itself. This particular reserve is basically anytime there is any surplus in that particular budget goes into this reserve.
Okay, it doesn't go into the other one. The other one is a
The
fund.
20,000 from Greenfield goes right into the reserve fund.
That's segregated money.
Segregated money, and this goes into the reserve. Anything that's over and above the
operating.
Any
Okay, and the
surplus.
operating budget is a budget that we present to them
Yeah,
every year.
They
Long
agree
about
with
this time of the year, they approve it.
Yeah.
Whatever's left over goes here. So again, no reason for discussion.
the only thing that we hadn't had in the previous draft was that, that $100,000 being the upper limit, because at one point we had that reserve build up quite a bit, and then we did council did make a resolution to move a bunch of that money into the fund.
Oh, yes, okay.
So I'm just wondering if we should maybe cap that, so once it reaches $100,000, then any of those surpluses from that 100 goes into the fund to start gaining some interest.
Oh, so capped at 100 and then transferred to the fund.
Yeah,
Okay, can we build that in as part of the policy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's build that in as part of the policy, capped at 100,000 and then transferred into the fund. Okay, and now I'm moving down to environmental reserve, the storm sewer. And we had 69 in that fund at the end of 2019. We'll put 15 in this year, bringing it up to 84. And the staff is recommending a lower level of 28.5 and an upper level of 250. So, and not less than 15,000 each budget year until the upper limit is reached. So, any discussion here? I don't see a problem here. Spending about 114,000 annually on storm sewer. All right, the only thing that I would like to see, I'd like to see the amount that goes in a little bit higher than 15 each year, even if it's only 20. Getting nods on 20 to go in each year?
Yeah,
Yeah,
20?
yeah,
that
Okay,
includes ditching too, so.
yep.
yeah.
So 20, a little bit in each year, and leave the lower at 28,598 and the upper at 250. Okay, moving on. The landfill site closure reserve. Now, let me see, there was 91,000 in that fund, in that reserve, it's not a fund, in that reserve at the end of 2019. We put nothing in. Should be 91 left in at the end of this year. We're spending about 1,820,000 on landfill each year. Well,
150,
what's that?
150, 149,700.
150,000, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, where am I getting 182?
It's just below.
Just below it.
Below it.
The line below.
Recreation.
Recreation.
Oh, I see,
Mr.
okay,
Mayor.
fair enough, that's my error then. Okay, and staff is recommending a lower limit of, what, 455?
No,
Oh,
37,
Grand
40.
38,
37.
37, 425.
Okay, 37, what is it, 37.5?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And an upper limit of
360.
360, any problems there? And reserve balance is 91, gas tax funds were used to complete the project in 2016. So there's no problems with the upper and the lower limit? And what's the balance to go in each year? Landfill site closure reserve. Looks like they're not gonna push us
We
any
have
further,
nothing
eh?
there.
Nothing.
No, we haven't been contributing, in the time I've been here, there's not been any contributions, there's been a few
Right.
withdrawals, but no contributions.
Should we start?
Well, we made the transition from a landfill site to a transfer station, and it seems to be working out relatively well. So
The
maybe
res-
we don't need to fix a problem that doesn't exist. Councillor Hunter?
I think we need to be starting to put money in there, because I really don't see that transfer site we have there now being adequate. I think we need to be looking at what we planned before, of building a new transfer site on the other side of the road. We had started putting money aside to build one over there. We've already had one fire there, and things are crowded up so tight there, it's gonna happen again, so I don't think that's an adequate site for the township.
Tires shouldn't be there though.
What would you suggest being put in as an annual contribution?
I'd say 20,000 a year we should be putting in, so.
I can go with that.
Okay, 20,000 a year in anticipation of moving to a new site at some point. What's it cost to move to a new site, Mr. CAO?
Put me on the spot. I'm trying to recall back in 2014 or 2015 when we had the report, we had 3 different sites. Somewhere in around the, I wanna say the $200,000 mark.
Yeah,
I
I think we'd be lucky to get away with that.
I was gonna say, Jesus.
Time to get the engineering done.
Yeah.
yeah.
Engineering testing.
We had some plans drew up on
We did, yeah, I'd have to
it.
go back
We
and
own,
look.
we own the land, I think, as I recall, I think it was 188,000 estimated cost to develop it.
Okay, so recommending anyway, lower limit of 37.5, upper limit of 360, and an annual contribution of 20. Got a consensus on that? Okay, that gets us through this item of the agenda.
Can we go back one, or a couple?
Okay, where are we going?
Just, to the, back to the planning reserve.
Planning. Like, if I can find it.
So the lower, like the cost, like 5,000 is what we have in there with 68,820 for the cost this year, 17,205 for the lower and 80 for the upper. Putting in, I think we adjusted it from 16K down to 10K.
That's correct.
But what happens if we get the job site challenge?
Oh, that's a
It's
different
a
story.
different, yeah, that's
That's a wild card.
Yeah, that would be,
Oh, should we not be planning for it though? Is that not the whole idea?
Yeah, probably it is, yeah.
Can I make a suggestion that we do have money from the industrial park land sales that could potentially be used for job site challenge? That's where we are drawing currently for some of the job site challenge, is we did draw from the industrial park land sale reserve fund.
Well, rather
Which
than
is
from the
not-
planning reserve.
Not, yeah, not from the planning reserve's more of a project-based reserve, so that it talks about doing those OP reviews and those types of planning policies.
Right.
That's what this particular reserve is for. So something like the job site challenge would probably be better suited to be used for those funds, from sale of industrial park.
Okay, I see where you're coming
That's
from
where I
there.
Would make the suggestion.
In other words, it's sort of a splitting between what you might call regular planning kind of challenges, and then that being a different cap.
Yeah, well, the planning reserve itself, when we're talking about OP reviews or other types of planning policies reviews, that affects the whole township. So when we're drawing and putting money in from taxation into these types of reserves, it should cover everybody. When we start talking about maybe job site challenge or site-specific places, like job site challenge or industrial park, then it's probably better if we used funds that are coming from, the sale of lands, as opposed to having our taxpayers pay for something like that. We can always return, if we get assessment, we can always put that money back in. If we sell the land, you could put that money back in. I think you'd be further along as opposed to the taxpayer footing the bill for that kind of type of.
See the argument?
I hear it, but, we're gonna generate an awful lot of tax dollars from that if it happens to come to fruition. Which is gonna benefit the entire township as well.
Yeah,
So I think,
but looking at it, at what this reserve is used for, it's a lot of studies, et cetera.
Well, isn't that the whole idea of?
Yeah, but
Some
don't
challenges
forget
and
that
costs
that we have the other wild card in our back pocket, which is that if we're selected, and I'm not telling you any secrets here, it's a public meeting, but if our submission is accepted and our geography, our base, our 2,000 acres, or 1,000 of our 2,000 acres, if that's accepted, our intention is, and I don't like to use the word short circuit, but our intention is, and I was gonna report this later on in tonight's meeting, we've already asked our planners to walk us through all of the planning steps that would have to be taken, and all of the official plan amendments, county, official plan amendments, township, zoning, bylaw amendments, township, prepare all of that, and ask for a ministerial zoning order to move directly across that whole spectrum in one step. And the minister has indicated that that is the purpose of those zoning orders. So all he's waiting for, if we're accepted, if our proposal is accepted, is a resolution from council asking him to do that.
So all of those costs, we won't bear them, the province will bear them? Is that the
They just
suggestion?
go away.
I think we gotta look at the point when we.
Well, I know the deputy mayor's shaking his head, but, and I shook my head for a long time too, until I had my conversation with the minister.
But even if we don't, I think we gotta look at the point, as our treasurer said, we have another fund, and that's the fund we also drew from for preparing the land for Giant Tiger to come.
Sorry, industrial.
That's where we drew the money from to get our $175,000, but it cost to
Yeah.
go ahead and land a
Yeah.
$20 million business in there. So
Yeah.
I think that's what we're shooting for here too.
Yeah.
We're using the money that we gained from industrial to try to draw more industrial in, hopefully to be able to put the money back to shoot for another one, so.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I hear you on that one, but shouldn't that go towards the purchase of land, and that planning dollars go towards the costs of planning, and that profits from the sale of industrial land goes towards the purchase of new industrial land? And that's, in my mind, that's the way I have it. Sorry, I see them as two things, not just one.
Well, we've sort of been looking at it over the past number of years as not just the purchase, but the purchase and readiness. Because it was from that reserve that you're talking about that we took the money for the original, what was it called?
The site certification.
Site certified, site, Ontario certified site.
Mhm.
And if you recall, there was not only money to get that Ontario certified site up and running, yes, it was 50% of that money was paid by the province, or excuse me, was recompensed to us by the province. But as well, we also invested from that fund for not Edison Drive, Newport Drive. Yeah, we took money for Newport Drive out of that, so.
Anyways, I just wanted to bring it back just because I thought, you know, it might be worth another consideration. There's no appetite, it's all good.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on then, and moving on, that takes me to, where am I now? I think I'm at,
Cardinal Water.
yes.
7E.
7E.
Cardinal Water.
Cardinal Water and Industrial Park Distribution System Financial Plan Update. And we dealt with that at the last meeting. And we have a recommendation here in front of us. And so that plan, the revisions to the plan are incorporated in the plan. And so discussion if any.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Just a moment, bear with me, please. Unfortunately,
Can you get me the page too?
yes, I will.
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to start off on, it's on page 42 of 57, or page 8 in the briefing note. Table 4.1 is the breakdown of the charges, which is $2 per cubic meter, and then under 20 cubic meters, and then over 20 cubic meters is another price. However, in the Cardinal Water bill per year based on 15 cubic meters per month, why does that say 15 when our rates are on 20 cubic meters as the high and low?
I can answer that through the chair. The 15 cubic meters is kind of an average use of a home, so that's just industry standards, that 15 cubic meters is typically what we see people using. So that's why I use the 15 cubic meters.
All right, so if we pass the recommendation, what is the proposal going to be? Is it going to be 15 cubic meters, or is it going to be 20 cubic meters where the break comes?
The rates are not changing.
Well, the rates will be changing by 1%.
Yes,
So
the potential.
forecast it, yes, forecast it. Will be
Okay.
changed in the plan. But each year that plan will be, each year the actual budget will be discussed at committee and council. They may choose not to do 1%, they may choose another amount or nothing. We're just giving a high level six-year overview.
Okay, so it's a 6-year overview with discussion each year, I'm clear on that.
Yep, okay.
Okay, because according to my calculations, we'll be increasing over until 2027, we'll be increasing approximately on an average of $11,000 a year. So, and that's almost what it is today, to be quite truthful. So it's really not, I don't think it's really out of line that much, even though it sounds a tremendous amount. But on page 46, figure 6.1, projected expenses. Up until 2025, it's pretty normal. What is the spike in 26 and 27 to drive the expenses up a considerable amount? Like we're going from about 430 roughly to in 27 to almost 480, 485.
So if you look at
Sure, I can answer that. Actually, what that's looking at is, that- so it's about a $60,000 difference, and by that point in time, the plan is projecting to borrow money for the the balance of the County Road 2 project. So there would be
Or
some
have it in a
principal,
reserve.
there would be some principal and interest payments on the debt. That's what's increasing in 2027. We're gonna be starting to draw, this plan is projecting that we're gonna have to pay some money back to do that final phase of the County Road 2 project. Because
Okay.
at that point, the expenditure is far beyond what could be expended from the reserve or for the user fees. So we've gotta fund that project somewhere else. So the projection is to borrow, and so the increase in the operating expenses is your principal and interest payments.
And that will be in full discussion with council, of course.
By that point in time, for sure, yeah, whether we go that route or we don't go that route. But this is just a forecasted way of funding a project in that fashion. The 2015 plan had a similar projection as
Yes.
well.
Yes. Oh, okay, Mr. Mayor, I think the confusion has eased a little. Thank you.
See if I can add to it just a tiny bit, through the chair to the treasurer. 23 to 24, I'm on page 52.
52?
And can you give
So
me
just-
another page reference, please?
52 of 57. Hold on. On the digital, it's 53. On mine, it's 53.
What's the number?
What's it start with? Projected
Is it
sum?
appendix?
Appendix A-2.
Okay, that helps.
Yes.
Does that help?
That helps.
It's page 18 of the brief.
Page,
Oh, you're using a different
Yes.
one, sorry. Okay, so are we all in the same, we're good?
Appendix 2, right?
So looking at 21, 22, 23, and so on, on all of the lines, there's moderate increases everywhere, except for 2024, which shows a decrease from 2023, and then a pretty decent jump back to 2025. Is there a reason for that?
On the revenue line.
On the revenue
Yeah.
line, yes. That was the only thing I noticed, the whole
Yeah.
thing, when I was looking through the numbers.
But 21 to 22 is a pretty good.
Yeah, there's a good
Yeah.
jump from 22 to 23, there's actually a big jump.
Yeah, but yet when you average that out, it's approximately 11,000 a year increase.
yeah. I'd have to go further into my more detailed sheet to determine the revenue, amounts specific before I can answer that question, unfortunately.
I just going through it, I just noticed there was a difference, and I was just curious as to what it was.
Yeah.
That's it for me. Looks good.
I can certainly look into that, and when this is brought back to council, I can confirm that at the council meeting to get.
Appreciate that, thank you. But I will support the recommendation.
Further discussion?
Not for me.
Okay, there's a recommendation in front of us here for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Hunter moving. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dillabaugh seconding. Ready to deal with the question? About to call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. Okay, so that, I think, concludes that part of the agenda, and I'm at item number 8 on the agenda, which is council inquiries, notices of motion. And does anybody have anything to bring up there? Councillor Hunter?
I have one inquiry, as I mentioned to you earlier, when I attended the last committee meeting here, that I noticed that it wasn't being filmed, and got a lot of feedback from discussion on the bylaw that I think probably we wouldn't have had if it would have been videoed, that people could have viewed the video and actually heard what actually was said instead of what people interpreted as being said. So I'd like to see the community development committee meetings videoed the same as the other meetings.
I like that idea too.
Okay, now, and I don't know what the reason was that we were doing just the finance committee and the PW, maybe the clerk can enlighten us on that.
Through the chair, that was the direction I was given at the time through that council.
Oh. So, if it changes, it can change. Okay, all right, so, discussion? Well, now, let me go back a step. Counselor Hunter, are you putting that forward as an inquiry or as a notice of motion? Excuse me.
Forward as notice of motion.
And you're gonna bring the motion forward at the council meeting?
Yes.
To have that CDC committee meetings videotaped,
Right?
to have them videotaped.
Yes.
And I think it's already been explained that we don't have, at this point in time, we don't have technology to live stream. So what we do is videotape and then upload the videotape on YouTube.
Correct.
Okay, and did you want in?
Nope, not at all. Nope,
Okay.
That's a great idea.
I agree.
I have one, Mr. Mayor, well, actually, it's a county matter, but I'll give it to you. 2179 County Road 44, Newman Road, we got a bad curve there. We had a bus stop the other day and a vehicle coming south, the bus stopped north, and you had there's black marks there because when you come around the corner, school bus lights were on, but he couldn't stop in time.
Hit the bus?
No, we had to put the black marks because the door was open and let the child off.
Where's that, Steve?
Newman Road, the truck was going south, the bus was going out to drop off the child. Nice thing about it, it's on that side of the road where the child comes out. Doesn't go across the traffic, but still, it scared the driver. The driver just, obviously, he was paying attention, but he just came around 80 kilometers if you look at that. I'd like to see if we can't get some kind of sign up there, bus turning, be prepared to stop, some sort of a sign like that.
Wonder what his speed was.
Actually, the mother said it was just 80, 85, just going around the corner.
Okay, so I've gotta figure out how to deal with this. I think I'm gonna do it this way. If the CAO would get in touch with the county, then
Take a look at Newman Road on south.
and apparently it's 2179 Newman Road.
So
No, 2179 County Road 44.
Old County Road 44.
2179 County Road 44, at or near Newman Road.
Right, you'll see it, well, anybody will see it before you get around there, yeah.
Is that South Glennsville?
Yeah, wait.
So if you'll do that, that will make it sort of official to them. I don't know what you can do. I mean, it's a county road. If the speed limit is 80, it's 80.
But a sign would help maybe alert, like a school
Yeah,
bus.
signed up.
Be
different
prepared
places.
to
School
stop.
bus stopping, so.
Yeah, be prepared to stop or something like that.
Yeah.
They just have a.
Nobody
Yeah.
pays any attention to signs anyway.
We have them,
Well, nobody pays any attention to them. That's, the reality is that signs don't do that much. I'm just wondering if, and I don't know what the sight lines are,
Well,
but,
flashing light or something.
you know, should the stop be moved? The stop is probably at the student's driveway, is it?
Yeah, it is, and you can't move that.
Can't move the stop.
We'll follow up with.
Even a yellow flashing light, you know, below the sign, might get someone's attention. You know, those lights I see.
well, but of course, we did get a stop moved on Cheney Road, so.
Yeah, but it's when it's at the driveway, that's the safest place. Sorry, Mr. Ferguson, I can't let you in just yet. Okay. So, anyway.
Could you look into that, please, the CEO? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, is there anything else under council inquiries or notice of motion? Okay, nothing there. All right, so then I'm gonna go to the mayor's report. I'm gonna go through this quickly because there is a long closed session here. So first of all, in the mayor's report, I just wanted to make congratulations on behalf of council to the Spencerville Agricultural Society for the 2020 virtual Spencerville Fair, September the 10th to the 13th. Now, I don't know how many members of council had an opportunity to watch some of the live streaming, but I was quite interested in the way it was done. I mean, they did a live streaming once each day. The fair is generally Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so they had live streaming for once each day and dealt with the things that would ordinarily be done if the fair was on. There was just the same kind of activities, the same kind of contests, except that everything had been done in advance. All the exhibits had been judged in advance. The videos had been prepared in advance, and then on the day itself, the live stream sort of presented video after video after video of each of the things. It was very well done, and I wanted to congratulate the Spencerville Agricultural Society for the way it was done. And if I could just ask the clerk if she would prepare a letter, that I'd like to send a letter to the president of the Agricultural Society and just congratulate them. I thought it was great that the Spencerville Agricultural Society made the decision to do a virtual fair instead of standing down, as many of the other fairs in Eastern Ontario have done. I think all the other fairs in Eastern Ontario sort of stood down for the year, but Spencerville kept going, and they did well at it. Now, one of the things another thing I wanted to mention, council is aware, because of my email, that we extended the free bottled water to September the 11th, that was due to end on September the 11th. We extended it to September the 30th, just as a way of kind of dampening down some of the noise that was starting to occur. And I just want to say that we all recognize that as a corporation, we have no responsibility for private wells on private property. And that is clearly understood. And the reason that we got to bottled water in the first place was because we thought initially, when bad test results, well water test results were coming in, we thought that there was some possibility that there may have been some compromise of our sewage collection system. Now that potentiality has pretty much been ruled out. And when we were comfortable that it was ruled out, the free bottled water was scheduled to end on the 11th. There was a great hue and cry. I had several people. Well, let me put it this way. It was easier to just dampen it down than it was to deal with the mess. So we dampened it down. It's going to September the 30th. The cost is going to be relatively simple. Now, in conjunction with all of that, I just want to report to council. A lot of this testing of wells came about as a result of the new quadplex with 4 wells on David Street. And there's all kinds of accusations in the community that it was those 4 wells that whatever happened caused the problems. Now, I'm happy to report tonight that those 4 wells were tested. Mr. Ferguson, who is here with us tonight, tested them. I'm going to ask him in a minute to describe how he tested them and the extent that he went to and why he went to that extent. But let me say that out of the 4 wells, they tested the one on the left and the one on the right, and both of those wells came back at 0, 0. 0 coliform, 0 E. coli. And when Mr. Ferguson describes how he tested them, you'll see that the test runs right to the aquifer, so that he has no worry about what was in the water column or in any other place along the system. Now, I'll let Mr. Ferguson explain that first, and then I want to go to the CAO and get an update on where exactly we are with test results coming into this office. So, Mr. Ferguson, if you would, please first, just describe to us how the method and the methodology you used for the testing of those 4 wells.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what I did was last Friday, I went in, the electricity isn't hooked up to the pumping systems as of this time yet. The power is at the houses, but there's only just a panel there to supply temporary power for the construction. So we hooked onto the submersible pump wires, which are already installed in the well, with a control box. And we powered the pumps that are in the wells off of generators, and we pump the wells directly out of the lines that are coming from the wells into the house. We discharged the wells for 35 minutes, each well. Tested to make sure there was no chlorine residual left in the water, because the wells were chlorinated when they had the pumps installed. And then we pulled water samples off we had a test tap on the discharge line. We had a straight through flow line and a test tap off to the side on a T. We heated that up with a torch to sterilize the tap and pulled water samples off and took it to Exnova, or it's not called Exnova now, but anyhow, the lab in Ottawa, Friday afternoon for bacteriological samples, and the samples came back on Saturday at 00 for the A and D. So that's, the water's coming directly out of the wells. There's no plumbing in the house. It's a straight line into the house and discharging into the sewer actually.
And did you pump enough to get all the water out of the water column?
We pumped it at 10 gallons a minute for 35 minutes. So we pumped 315, 320 gallons of water out of each well in that 30-minute period.
So your sample is pretty much coming right straight from the
Straight out of
aquifer?
the aquifer. That's correct, yes. Yes. And I think if the other wells were tested in a manner similar to that you could pump it straight off of the well, that would give you a true test on the aquifer, not on the plumbing in the existing houses. We have run into complications over the years where lines in the houses that go nowhere, and the water goes out and stagnates, and not stagnates, that's the wrong terminology, but it's sitting there, it's not fresh, and then when you try to do a water sample and you're pulling water by that line that hasn't been used or hasn't gone anywhere, then you can quite often get a bad test off it. So in order to get a true test on the water that's coming out of the well, you have to pump the volume that's in the well and take it as close to the water supply coming in order to get a true test on the water that's coming into the house, and not in the plumbing that's in the house.
Now, also, I just wanted you to mention briefly the way certain well caps can compromise a well.
In 92, when the wells were constructed, we used a plain well cap, which is aluminum conduit cap that fits over the top of the well. Them caps were found to do the job somewhat, but not as good as what they could be. Prior to, in 2003, MOE regulation changed that the well caps had to be vermin-proof well caps, which are caps that are sealed with rubber gaskets, both bottom and top, to prevent any foreign object from getting into a water well. That being grass, clippings, bugs, spiders, earwigs, all of that stuff. And then the mold style caps were very, very susceptible to getting grass clippings and earwigs and vermin into the well.
Now, I just wonder if there's any questions for Mr. Todd, then I'm gonna ask the CAO to just tell us where we stand with regard to actual tests that have come in. Because, again, private wells are a matter of privacy between the well owner, exclusive to the well owner, and they have no obligation to present their test results to us, but a few of them have responded and given us results, and I want to get to that in a minute. So first of all, are there any questions for Mr. Ferguson, Councillor Dillabaugh?
Mr. Ferguson, was the Ministry of Environment there too, or just your crew?
Just myself, yes.
Has the Ministry of Environment been there to those 4 houses when they're in the area with the 2 groups to the CEO?
They've talked to the owner, but they didn't do tests because, as Mr. Ferguson has explained, although those 4 wells, the pumps are in the wells.
No, I realize that, no hydro.
But there's no hydro, yeah. So the ministry did not take any tests on those wells.
Would the ministry get that test to them that you sent to Ottawa, where it was 0-0?
No,
You took the test directly into Ottawa,
that's correct, yes.
and the results
They come
came
back.
directly back to you?
Come back to the homeowner and to myself.
The homeowner brought them into the CAO today. So, now, to the CAO.
Thank you.
Just wondering, how many people have actually brought us in tests?
So
Test results, I should say.
At this time, we've received either through email or dropped off by residents, 12.
And out of those 12, how many are bad, how many are good?
I believe that there were 3 that were good and 9 that were poor.
Okay, so, it's, at this point, it's beginning to look as though those 9 people, who we don't know who they are, they've all been apprised by the health unit, because those are health unit results. They've all been apprised by the health units that their water really is not drinkable. And we understand that health unit has provided them with some direction as to the maintenance and activities that they should do to, on their wells, to bring their wells to produce a good sample. Have we had any kind of feedback at all from the 9 that don't have good test results?
With respect to the actions that they have taken?
Yeah.
I do not have any information on actions taken.
Okay, so there you have it. It's in the air, so we put it that way. I don't have to tell you that there are, well, I don't have to tell you that there are a lot of meetings and discussions going on in which the council does not look, it looks like we're the bad guys, let me put it that way. I don't think that's the case. I'm really comfortable now after today getting the results from there, and I'm extremely comfortable. And I don't know what else we can do for the folks that have bad results if they don't ask for our help. And really, we're not the party that they should be coming to. They should be coming to either the health unit, or the Ministry of the Environment, or their favorite well driller. You know, to get experienced help from their favorite well driller, whoever that may be. And we have one sitting here, so we know that that expertise exists within our community. Councillor Cameron.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, but I do have a question for Mr. Ferguson, and that is, the wells that you tested were the David Street build. Is there any way that the build of those 4 wells impacted these other wells?
In my opinion,
Yes,
no.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't know what wells tested bad and what wells
Right.
tested good. We don't know that. But the majority of the wells around the David Street build have more casing in them than the wells that were drilled at the David Street build. So,
More or less?
more casing. The majority of the wells around there were in the grant program in 1992, which have 92 to 102 feet of pipe in the ground before you start looking for water. The wells that were drilled on David Street in total, have 80 feet of borehole. That's 22 feet of casing, which is Ministry of Environment regulation, and the wells were a total depth of 80 feet deep. So the impact on the ones that have 100 feet of casing in them is null and void, because we haven't even hit the casing mark yet, right?
So you're not at the same level.
Not at the same level.
Another follow-up question, Mr. Mayor?
Okay, follow up here, and then Councillor Gilliland.
Yes, my follow-up question to all that is there any indication that we're going to extend the bottled water program after the 30th of September, or is that going to be a cutoff?
No, that's going to be the cutoff. And the only reason that it was extended was to try to dampen down some of the things that were occurring. And it worked something like this. The letter went out on, I think it was September the 4th, saying that we were going to end it on September the 11th. So that was a week's notice. But some people did not get those letters until the 8th of September. And so then there was a great hue and cry that they didn't have time to make adjustments, they didn't have time to get corrective measures in place, and you know, even if they could get corrective measures in place, they were gonna have to do tests, and it was gonna, you know, you have to have 2 good tests before you know you got a good result, and you're really supposed to wait a week in between. So it was easier to just extend it than it was to deal with the potential of a public meeting here this evening. So Councillor Dillabaugh.
Mr. Ferguson, you're saying that the 4 new ones that you drilled, you got a maximum of 22 feet of casing, is that right?
That's correct.
And some of them around there is over 100 feet of
That's
casing?
correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Why would that be?
That was what the specs were for the grant program.
In 92.
They wanted them down that deep.
They wanted them down that deep. They wanted to case off past all the shallow water bearing zones. That was, we were given a number for every site specific on how much casing to put in.
Now, would you just elaborate for council what this 92 program was all about? And let me just give you a little bit of background to just put your answer in context. So the town went to a sewer system. The town installed a sewer system in about that same time. And subsequent to the sewer system being installed, there was a program where wells were, what, rejuvenated? How would you describe it?
Replaced.
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 And were all of those, how many wells were actually replaced?
35?
35 wells were replaced.
Don't quote me on the exact number, I'm just doing that off the top of my head, but I believe it was somewhere in that vicinity.
And was that at the owner's expense?
85% was paid by the Ministry of Environment, 15% was a cost to the owners.
So were all the wells in the area replaced?
No, it wasn't mandatory, it was an option for the homeowner to replace the well if he so desired. It wasn't a mandatory thing.
So some people opted out.
Some people didn't have their wells replaced, correct?
And is there a possibility that some of these bad results are coming from those that weren't replaced?
You're asking me a question I can't answer because I don't know where the.
Oh, you don't know?
I knew so.
Okay.
This is coming back to me being a green deputy mayor, but is it normal procedure through question period to have what appears to be a delegation?
No, it isn't. This is the mayor's report, and I'm making the report, and I wanted to report on David Street. And I wanted to have Mr. Todd talk to that briefly, because there's every potentiality that this will go further, but we can end it here.
Yeah, I'm beginning to feel it's more of a delegation than it is a mayor's report.
Okay, so I'm moving on. And I did speak just briefly during an earlier part of the meeting about the potential of ministerial zoning orders as it pertains to the Ontario Job Site Challenge, so I'm not going to go into that anymore, other than to say that our consultants are working on that aspect of things. I think I did report in an earlier meeting that we, during the AMO conference, we did have a delegation with the minister about the job site challenge, where our application stood relative to the whole project. What we don't know is how the evaluation of the submissions is proceeding at this point in time. But I have been assured that as they get further into the evaluation process, we will have an opportunity to further expound on our application. And when we get to that point where we're being asked to answer questions or to expound on our application, I want to have a good indication from our consultants as to how we can move our proposal a quantum jump ahead by dealing with a number of official plan and zoning issues. So, that's the end of the mayor's report. If there are any questions, we can deal with your questions. There's just Mr. Todd in the audience, Mr. Ferguson in the audience. And so I'm going on to item number 11. Now at item number 11, we have a closed session. So I need the motion to go into a closed session. I'll ask Councillor Hunter, you got it?
Myself, second by Deputy Mayor Deschamps, as the committee proceed into closed session at 8:40 p.m. in order to address the matters pertaining to proposed or pending acquisition or disposal of land by the municipality or local board, specifically industrial land, and minutes of the closed session dated May 11, 2020. Litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administration tribunals affecting the municipality, specifically insurance claim.
Thanks, John. Mr. Mayor. Okay, and those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried, and we'll just have a 10-minute break here.
Oh, yeah, I got the committee of the whole through.
It's moved by myself and seconded by Councilor Dillabaugh that the closed meeting does now adjourn and the open meeting of committee does now resume at 9:50 p.m.
Okay, those in favor coming out of the closed session?
Aye.
Motion is carried. And so now reporting out from the closed session, Councillor Dillabaugh has a motion to approve minutes.
Moved by myself, second by Council Cameron, that the committee of the whole approves the closed session minutes dated May 11th, 2020.
There you go. Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried. And then reporting further from the closed session, council had long discussion with the CAO regarding the road allowances for Mega Holdings Inc. and provided direction to staff. There was a further discussion concerning Purple Farms, a buyback option, and staff was instructed to arrange a meeting. And then under 1B, matters before administrative tribunals affecting municipalities, specifically an insurance claim, county reviewed, or committee of the whole reviewed correspondence, a chain of correspondence with regard to a claim, and provided direction to staff to further investigate. And that's the reporting out from the closed session. And now the motion to adjourn, Councillor Cameron.
No.
Oh, sorry.
Deputy Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor John Hunter, that the committee of the whole does now adjourn at 9:51 p.m. 9 minutes ahead of schedule.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion is carried.
Thank you.